Alrighty. Hello. Hello. So many thoughts. I'm like, still just stopped. But I was like, still shaking. Adrenaline running in my hand. And the experience I just had. It was an awesome experience. It was positive, and afterwards I was just like, oh, I've got to share this one because it so perfectly articulates and highlights so many of these important concepts, right? I've been thinking a lot, obviously, about trusting ourselves and the importance of this for women. I've been sharing about it a lot. I've been feeling a desire to speak about it more. And one of the key things that just really has felt prominent to me is that there's a misunderstanding about that, right? Like I feel like, because I'm a language person, right? So I'm always looking for what is the language that we're using? What are the connotations? What's the association with that? Is that helping us actually communicate the things we're wanting to? Has it taken on a new meaning? Is it now getting conflated or construed? Like the words we use matter. Because from an energetics perspective, right, there's like a thread of energy that I'm wanting to convey from me to you, right? And you could think of that physically and like the sound waves from my mouth, my vocal cords through my mouth that are then hitting your ears, right? But you can also think of it as like energetically this certain vibration that connects to the messages I want to be sharing is threading that to you. And it's being conveyed by the words that I'm choosing to speak. And depending upon the words I'm using, you're encoding that or interpreting that in a certain way, which is going to alter the frequency or the energy that you receive from me, right? And so wanting to find that language, the actual spoken words that will create the ability for the energy I'm wanting to convey to accurately come through, right? Most easily come through the majority of people. So if I know there's a certain word that people are going to view a certain way, right? I want to say that differently. So when I think about these words of like women wanting to be in their power or sovereignty or personal authority or autonomy or trusting ourselves, right? There's this realization that those words don't mean the same thing to everybody. To some people, they are very sacred, beautiful, wonderful, empowering, meaningful ones. To other people, they are scary, frightening, bad, dangerous, negative ones, right? And I've been thinking about that difference in the words and the language and how they're received and trying to figure out like how is a way to get this idea through, right? So that we can understand it better, so that we can connect in on that, the undertone of the conversation versus just getting preoccupied with the words, right? The human part of us fights and battles over words and semantics and what's going on, right? And I just spent a whole bunch of time talking about why words matter. But at the end of the day, it's that energy underneath that matters. What is the subtext of the conversation that's happening? And when those things don't match, that's when we usually feel like somebody's not lying or they don't really believe what they are saying or they don't mean what they're saying, right? Those two things are off. We want to try and find those ways to most clearly express it. And so I'm thinking about this whole concept and realizing, especially after this experience, that when I'm talking about trust in myself, right, it's coming from a place of believing I am capable of, I don't even know how to describe it, right? The best way I can say is to like share the experience I had. I have had a long history, right, of struggling with, you're good, head to work, glad you're here, I'll catch you next time. But I have had a long history of struggling with like customer service people, right? And throughout our whole married life, my husband has been so frustrated so many times because I'm afraid of the contention. I'm afraid of the confrontation. I'm afraid of like pushing back on something, of trying to say, no, I was in the right when somebody else is giving me a reason and a perspective to say, no, actually you weren't, here's why, or well, this is why we're in the right, and not knowing how to navigate that, right? I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. But what I realized is it's not even, and like, couldn't even tell you right now where this tendency came from. I'm not going to break down all of that history or background or whatever of why it's there. Just going to acknowledge right now it is, right? For me at least, and willing to bet for many others. And it's funny because if you ask me, I would say I've had a lot of self-esteem and confidence my whole life, but I'm realizing self-esteem and confidence are not the same as trusting myself. Like, that sense of trust just means I can hold the fullest of me in my relationships and engagements and conversations and experiences. And that comes across as being able to voice my thoughts and share my things and whatever, but I can hold that there without like bringing pieces of it back. And so I had an experience that's like many, right? And there's a situation where I was trying to, from my view, do the things that I needed to make sure something happened in the way it was supposed to. And the other party that I was talking with was like, well, actually, here's the rules, here's the things, here's where you failed. And I really believe, I don't even know, like we're still waiting. It's not like it's resolved or sorted or anything. But I was so proud of myself because the way I moved through the conversation, the way I moved through everything was not in like a, I'm demanding this thing and you were wrong and you failed in this way and this is why and this is why and this is why and so you need to give me this thing and you need this thing to happen. Like, it was largely a friendly conversation back and forth. I didn't have any animosity towards the person. Generally assumed like, hey, they're a good person coming from a good place. This is a situation. This is their viewpoint, right? And I wasn't trying to disregard or disrespect what they were saying or their perspective. I was being able to say like, look, I get it. I understand, right? Even drawing on some like commonalities of like being self-employed and understanding running a business and like what that looks like and what, how you have to navigate these things, like putting that sense of like, look, I'm not against you. I'm here in camaraderie with you, but I'm also going to express and say, here's also how I'm perceiving it and how it looked for me. And this is what I was trying to do. And I was showing up in all of these ways that were good and right and trying to make this thing happen. And it was like, every time they came back with like, well, this is the policy, or this is the what, or this is how things are, or this is why you should have done this instead. There was that like moment where it was met and it was like, okay, am I going to just accept what they are saying and decide that that is who I am and decide that that is true, which is what I've always done in the past? Or can I hold my sense of self here while we're having this conversation? And then from that place of holding myself, decide one way or another of, okay, now that I'm still connected to myself, do I agree with that? And if I do, okay, yes, right? I see that. I understand that. But I stayed in touch with myself. I stayed intact. Like I didn't just allow what they said to become who I was, right? Become what I thought, become what I believed. Holding that sense of self there. It wasn't, again, about the specifics, about what it was about why it was happening, about who was right or who was wrong, right? It was literally felt like just an exercise of, can you hold yourself here while you're navigating and doing this thing? And from that perspective, it was like this energetic weight training that I was doing. And every time it happened, it was like doing another rep. And it was so fun because I went the whole conversation and every single time kept that connection to myself. And by the end of it, the conversation was basically like, okay, like, all right. And it was so fun to see that I was able to do it in this way that felt what I would say is so aligned. Where again, it wasn't, I'm coming in and snow plowing and like, I know it's right and you were wrong and this is how you messed up and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong and all the ways and you're not going to be able to back out because you're a douchehead and this is why. Like, none of that. It was still able to be this like, hey, I get this and I understand that. And here's, yes, and I see that and I understand that. But also, I want to point this out. And well, yes, you could say that, but also, this is a piece here and I did this and this happened and this was occurring. And this is a piece where that's on your responsibility. This is the piece that is there for you that you're supposed to be doing, right? Like it was almost this like sense of just, hey, I'm just acknowledging yes, there are these rules, there are these things in place, there are these policies, there are these things that happen. And by that own definition, by that own standard, this thing is where it falls, right? And I walked out of it and literally like came into the other room. My husband's at his desk, and I just like collapsed onto the bed. My whole body's like shaking from the adrenaline of just like, I held it. I stayed there the whole time. I kept that connection to me, right? And that's what I think women are trying to describe, trying to articulate, is that, again, we won't get into the whys in this video, but it's just like, just practicing holding that version of me there when somebody else comes up against it, and not just immediately, right? This is where the giving our power away, giving our authority to somebody else, letting somebody else dictate or decide, like, I can't even begin to articulate the number of times that happens in just the seemingly small, simplest ways, by even my spouse, my children, my family, my friends, like so many ways, right? And part of that, yes, people pleasing past tendencies, sure, definitely contribute and play into that. But there's also a bigger paradigm here. And I feel like a piece of it is only academically and professionally did I feel like I got some of that, right? Where I got some training, and I feel like that was one of the wonderful things my dad did, is he made sure that I got to have those experiences, and I learned how to hold myself, hold my own in an academic and professional setting. So I felt comfortable. I felt like I deserved to be anywhere that a man was. I didn't struggle ever in my workplace environments or things because I didn't know not to, honestly, is what it feels like. Like, I just had always grown up knowing I belong there. It didn't matter. Somebody might have said something that maybe they were trying to tell me, like, hey, no, or say something derogatory, but it was like I didn't even have the thought to think about it until I started talking with other women and hearing their experiences in the workplace and hearing what was going on with them and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happening. Like, that shouldn't be, right? But that was like the only area of my life. The rest of it, it was like really soft. And I think that's why it's one of my passions to talk about leadership, and especially what it is to be a matriarch, or this like feminine type of leadership, because it is this connection to self, it is this centeredness, it is this being able to stay not just connected to who you truly are, but in like deep trust with it, and to hold that regardless of what's going on in the world around you, regardless of the external circumstances or experiences, regardless of what anyone else is saying or doing, but then to also be able to do that in a way where you've remained in a space of being able to have love and connection and trust for others, right? It's not coming from a guarded place, right? There's not a barrier up that is protecting me so that I can hold that on and be there, which is what I see a lot of women doing, which is what I talk about being in your masculine, you're not fully in your feminine, right? There's a little bit of a layer there in between, right? That's protecting me. So I'm not actually having to do all the work. My shield is there doing that work. But the other party feels that and recognizes, hey, there's a lack of connection, there's a lack of trust here, right? And that's going to make them want to push back harder, which makes you want to push back harder. And that's where we get into this like battle bit. But when you learn how to hold it without the barrier there, that is true power, right? And the results and the things and the dynamics, everything just starts to change when you operate from that space. And I love helping women learn how to do that and to show your everyday life is the training ground, right? Like, I couldn't create a better program with better exercises than your own unique individual life, right? It is perfectly curated. Like, even the fact that I wanted to do a live earlier today, it didn't end up happening. Then I had this experience, and now I'm able to do this live that like better talks about and exemplifies everything I'm wanting to describe this morning, but it's happening now. Like, couldn't have curated it better. That's what I mean. Your life is so divinely designed and orchestrated and co-created without us even realizing, like, not in a weird, you're locked into this fate bit, but in this, you're in a good space, right? Like, I'm supporting you in who you're becoming. Every experience, every thought, every like aspect of it is here. And we learn how to navigate those things. We learn how to use them, not just as like, oh my gosh, that was so hard. I can't believe I had to deal with that today. Like, oh, why did it have to be this way? Why was it so hard? Right? Like, it didn't have to be that experience. It instead got to be this like, can't believe I did that. Like this, again, recognizing it and viewing it as this training experience that it was, right? Which is why I'm starting a whole new program, Aspiring Matriarchs, right? 6-month long program. Every month we're covering a different topic, a different aspect of feminine leadership. But it's 2 parts, right? So one part of it is like the support group because having that community, having the connection, being able to interact with other people to discuss like, how are you doing this? How are you standing here? How are you holding that? How are you building your trust? Like, I need somebody to vent to. I need people to understand like how hard this is and this thing that's going on, right? That's one piece. There's a lot of those out there, but this is a special one because on the other side of it is understanding the energetics of what's going on and learning how to walk and move through the world through that undertone that is there, how to utilize that and to call on that and allow that to do a lot of the work for you. And then it becomes this training ground too, where I'm helping you learn to read what are the experiences that you're having in your life that are tapping you into that trust in yourself, so that when you have that trust in yourself, you move through the world differently. Okay? We're going to talk about trust a lot. Tomorrow we're going to be discussing why trust in yourself is actually the foundation, the critical main message that we should be telling women all over the world, because that is what's going to change everything in our systems, in our families, as individuals, both men and women. Like, it's the fundamental aspect of everything, that trust in yourself. So if you want to hear more details about my program, we're going to be starting soon. When you sign up, there's some special bonuses for you. So if you want details, let me know. Guys, it's going to be so good. Can't wait to have you join us. Have a wonderful rest of the day. All right. Bye, YouTube.